the people of sake actually brought me into sake.
Back in 1988, this place was actually in Ginza on the main drag.
At first it was kind of soy sauce, it was miso.
To the point where it actually changed my life.
New Year's Day 1989.
Not just sake as a beverage, but all the culture and history and...
Welcome, you're tuning in to another episode of Sake on Air, the mostly bi-weekly podcast created to empower the population of sake and shochu curious across the globe, broadcast from the Japan Sake and Shochu Information Center in Tokyo, Japan, and made possible with the support of the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association. My name is Justin Potts, one of your regular co-hosts here at Sake on Air, and this time around, we're continuing our exploration into the sake-specific glassware created by Riedel, together with Riedel Japan President and CEO Wolfgang Angyal. In our previous episode, Wolfgang introduced us to the origins of both the Daiginjo and Junmai glassware, as well as shared the process that went into realizing what is arguably the most influential glassware introduced into the world of sake in recent history. This week, we delve straight into the tasting segment of the presentation. A small word of warning to our listeners before we get started. You're probably going to want to have a bottle of sake on hand while listening to this particular episode. We recognize that an audio-only format isn't exactly the best way to communicate the complex sensory experience of a tasting, but if you can sip along with us, I think you may find this to be actually one of our most enjoyable listens to date. Plus, there are so many interesting anecdotes and small tidbits of information scattered throughout, referencing not only Riedel glassware, but the history and drinking culture surrounding sake, that I think, even though it's a rather long episode, we're pretty sure you'll want to stick around till the very end. And while not necessarily a prerequisite for enjoying this week's episode, for those that have yet to listen to the previous episode number 19, where Wolfgang gives an excellent introduction to the glassware that we're exploring throughout this episode, you'll likely get much more out of this particular recording if you hit the pause button right now, jump back to episode number 19, which is only about 40 minutes long, and then come back and rejoin us again when you're done. So with that, we'll jump right into the tasting room together with Sake On Air hosts, Sebastian Lemoine, Rebecca Wilson-Lai, Chris Hughes, Marie Nagata, and myself. Kanpai. So we're at this was your original location here in Aoyama, correct?
Yes, this location we actually occupy almost since we had this location. I think this location already had Riedel, I think, for over 30 years. And or more or longer. It was a different company, and we took over that company. So this has been a very important location for us. This is our biggest store location, where we also have a tasting studio where we're sitting in right now, where we do tastings on a daily basis. We have a tasting bar. We also have a tasting bar in Ginza. We have a store in Ginza that we just opened last year, which is probably very interesting because we can also do sake tastings, glass tastings. So if you swirl the glass, the easiest to swirl is to put the glass down on the table and maybe draw a little zero. Or if you're more familiar with it, you can also do it in the air. But when you put your nose into the glass, you can definitely detect this kind of character of those aromas. The alcohol is there, but it's not dominant. It's also served still at a relatively cool temperature, which will also temper the alcohol. But this was the aroma profile that was chosen for the Daiginjo glass. Now, you've all seen that we've poured from the same bottle, correct? Now the problem I have really in Japan is when we use this as a comparison, because we do not want to do ochoko bashing. Ochoko bashing is not our intention, but we look at it as a vessel of a certain shape. And when we have a very small shape, it is physically impossible to capture the aromas. It is sake, but you do not have this kind of intensity and quality of aromas that you would get from this kind of egg shape.
Point one taken.
Yeah.
Very well taken.
Yeah.
It's very clean. This is why it's also very popular with consumers, because anybody can smell this.
Well, and in the realm of a Daiginjo that we're testing now, and indeed so. But as you're saying, we're not into ochoko bashing. It's, I think
no.
And I have to its defense, is Daiginjo wasn't around when the ochoko was born in the Edo period, and for us, the ochoko is the sake at that time became the social media.
Yeah.
Of the Edo period, and the ochoko was the iPhone.
Yeah.
Because it was predominantly a drink to be a social lubricant, to communicate,
Exactly.
to
exactly.
communicate.
The purpose of the ochoko is different in the
Yes.
first place. It's not really for tasting.
and perhaps
The
maybe
opposite,
more the wine glass generation, especially we could say, or the sake specific glass generation. This is a conversation about what's happening inside of me, what's happening with my senses, how I'm engaging with it. And perhaps the ochoko is representative more of a time when everything was outside of you, everything was your interactions with something was paramount. The flow and the lubrication of your social connections was the ultimate aim of the drinking experience.
Yes.
What do we do about the sake? Because I've been a good student, haven't tried it yet. So I've been salivating.
Yes. Okay.
Mine's
Let's
almost gone.
let's
Catch up, Sebastian.
No. Let's before we taste, I need to just briefly explain, because drinking is a very unconscious process. We never think about it. It's the second most automated human reflex after breathing. When if you think about a newborn, it knows how to breathe, it knows how to drink, or it tries to, and it knows how to swallow. So we don't think about when we go from a vessel, and as infants, as children, we learn not to spill. That's the real lessons that we do after we're born, not to spill, to drink from something that we don't spill. And this is then until you have automated that action of not spilling, you still have to consciously, you're still conscious. So the infant is conscious. And then once he's gone, he knows, he looks at how much is in it, what's the shape, and it will compute immediately how to drink it. And as mentioned before, every time you drink from a vessel, and if we look at when I drink, please have a look at the position of my head. I really have to lean backwards in order to get to the liquid, because the liquid is in the glass on the bottom. So I have to really bend backwards in order to get to it. If I drink from the ochoko, I don't have to. I almost have to. It's a completely different head position. My slant is downwards. The liquid will fall into the sides underneath the tongue. Drinking from the Daiginjo glass, the tongue will move upwards. The tongue will move to the rim. The tongue will curl up in an arrow and wait for the liquid to arrive. And you will see what happens when you drink, how this affects the overall harmony of the drink. So when we taste from this glass, pay attention. Only today, consciously drink, and consciously see what happens with your physiology and anatomy.
And I'm thinking also the direction that the liquid flows in relation to how it touches the perceptors at the bottom, below the nose, right? And how you kind of detect aroma, if you like.
Yes.
That's going to be big as well, and perhaps that's another reason.
Yes. Also we will, either your brain or your nose will send you a message of how much alcohol is in that beverage, and we will automatically be more cautious when we smell more alcohol. Pay attention to when you have a whiskey. If you know you're drinking whiskey, you already take a very small sip, and if you smell it, it already comes to your nose and to your eyes. You will be very cautious.
Do we start with the?
We start with the
sake
Daiginjo glass.
or with the
Okay.
ochoko?
We start with the Daiginjo glass because we will go back and forth so you can compare easily.
So it's it's a great glass for compare.
Yes. So you see, it will deliver the liquid, not exactly on the tip, but just over the tip, into the front part of the tongue, before it moves backwards to a nice clean finish. And the important thing what we gathered from the last final workshops when we discussed it afterwards, after the final workshop, then we discuss it. Why did you choose this glass, or why did you choose that glass? It is because it still offers a beautiful umami. It extracts a little bit of the umami, the savoriness, and really integrates it beautifully with the sweetness and the acidity at this front area, which is what they found is the perfect package for presenting it.
You're right about the tip, because I tend to stick my tongue out a little bit because I've got slightly bucked teeth. And so because there's a space between my teeth, my tongue always wants to go and sit in the hole, right? So when I first tasted it, I wasn't paying attention and I just naturally stuck my tongue out. But then you said it doesn't hit the tip. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I'll pay attention this time. And you're right, it actually just passed my tip. And the flavor profile actually changed. That tiny little, me sticking the tip in and then it allowing it to flow just past the tip. Actually, what I really enjoyed with tasting it the second time was it triggered some more complex notes of bitterness that I didn't get the first time. And that just like lifted up the palate, and it really harmonized with some of those fruit notes that I was also getting in the mouth aroma. So that was actually just such a tiny little shift. It changed everything.
Yes, no, absolutely. It's. I mean, the only difference is that most people will probably not consciously position their tongue towards the beverage, right. So the flow will be fairly consistent. But let's try now maybe from the small vessel, from the ochoko, and you'll see that you do not lean backwards. The liquid will flow into the sides, and the alcohol will be very much emphasized. It is very broad splash into the sides, and you have a very high concentration of alcohol.
I find that it picks up the acidity more as well, yes, because what I actually had to do, what I didn't have to do here, was I actually had to suck it up. Yes. Because my head was down, I had to actually suck in rather than allow the sake to flow in. Yes. And because I sucked it in, it all went poof into my mouth in a very sort of disorganized burst.
Yeah,
sometimes
very
make you
tingly.
cough.
Yeah,
actually.
I can understand that. It's very tingly, and you definitely feel the acidity on the sides more. So I agree with that.
And the idea is to balance, because we humans are this is the one thing we're looking for. We're looking for balance. We're looking for length. We're looking intensity, concentration, and complexity of flavors, because we are ruled by defense and nutrition. If it's too bitter, it could be toxic. If it's too sweet, it's too ripe. You don't want to have too much of it. If it's too acidic, it's unripe. So we are always looking for balance in what we drink and what we eat. And what they're looking for is the balance of all the primary tastes in one beautiful package that they show here.
Maybe the timing of this question is not correct, but my favorite vessel for enjoying sake is actually the hirahai, the kind of saucer shaped vessel.
The sakatsuki.
The sakatsuki or the hirahai. And I find it, the way it kind of matches the shape of your mouth, all the flavors kind of enter at the same time, and you get a kind of perfect balance. And what do you think about that yourself? And does that kind of?
I find that very, very interesting, because we actually had a lot of those type of shapes in our workshops. The only thing is that they don't offer aromas. They completely, it's like smelling a lake that you can't really smell. And we understand that also that the origin of it maybe comes from a seashell, and then turned into a religious for rituals, used at rituals to thank the gods. And you had a hiki sakatsuki where you draw the favor of the gods I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a great story.
Right.
But they definitely are very interesting shapes to draw to drink from. Although I would say the delivery is very, very broad, and you only use a very small amount. If you have a bigger amount there, it'll just
That's true.
It'll
That's
just
true.
spill
It's-
over into your
yeah.
mouth. So they're really made for very tiny, small amounts,
definitely true.
and just one sip and it's finished.
Yeah. They definitely don't do anything for the aroma.
Yes,
That's 100%.
yes.
But yeah, whereas with a small choco, you tend to close your mouth. These open shapes force you to
Yes.
open your mouth,
Yes, yes,
and that's why why
Yes.
the flow is quite different.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at the shape of your mouth from a small vessel, you have to pucker your mouth, which means that your tongue also will offer a much smaller surface area, a much smaller entry surface area, different place. And most of these the Riedel glasses, the specific glasses, are quite ergonomically designed, big enough to adjust to our senses, to our anatomy, not the other way around. Because here we have to adjust this way, and here it's a very natural flow. It's a flow. We want to allow the flow to be as natural as possible. So, but I think also in Japan, I would say you had different vessels, really up to the 50s. You had hundreds and different of shapes in Japan. They all were small. They all were built to suit Japanese aesthetics and lower table aesthetics. Just like in the West, there was not really much thought going to the shape of a glass, how it affects your enjoyment of beverages. What we intended to also is we wanted to have this shape to be on a dinner table anywhere in the world, and not to shrink down to size dimensions that are unfamiliar with non-Japanese. What we want to do is we want to have the same height as a wine glass. Let's maybe get one and show you that when you have them on the table, and I think on the video we showed it together with wine glass, and we served wine at that lunch when we had the Junmai, because this is how we want to serve sake outside of Japan. It must be integrated into people's lifestyle. It must be integrated into their culinary habits.
Absolutely.
And it must be easy. It must be easy to understand, easy to choose, easy to enjoy, easy to integrate.
Lifestyle friendly.
Yes.
So may I ask a follow-up question in terms of, you said the Daiginjo glass was predominantly focused on the Japanese market.
Initially, yes.
Initially. How about the Junmai glass? Is it also the same market focus?
We don't set out, say, okay, what's the market? Because we do not actually we don't work that way. We respond. We respond to requests from the industry. And we need broad support of the industry, because without the industry supporting a shape, we cannot make the minimum production runs that make it somewhat economical. I mean, this Junmai glass development took 8 years. It was, I would say, those 8 years was not very economical when we just isolate the search for the Junmai glass. So if we need the industry support, we always go to where the beverage is made. When we go to Mexico, we work with the Tequila Association to produce a tequila glass. If we make a Malbec glass in Argentina, we will have broad industry support. The same with workshops everywhere, as well as the sake workshops. So it is only that we need to have a critical mass of market in our sight in the foreseeable future to make the decision then to go ahead with one of the glasses. And in this case, we knew the time was right. We knew we had to do it. I have to say, we were actually quite surprised about the response about the Junmai glass. George Riedel said, "This is never going to sell. What are we going to do with this?" And now we have so many requests from all over the world where sake is drunk, and because it's a unique shape. It's also a iconic shape. It is actually a shape that did not exist before. It's not a wine glass. It's not a cocktail glass. And when you see this glass on tables around the world, people who know it will know this person is drinking Daiginjo, drinking Junmai. Just like when ladies like the flute for champagne, because they like to be seen drinking champagne from this beverage.
Something I like about the shape as well is, and we discuss it on Sake On Air regularly, is how sometimes in overseas market people tend to think that Daiginjo sake is superior to Junmai sake. And defining such an elegant shape with a higher stem for Junmai kind of brings Junmai to a level definitely comparable to the Daiginjo, Daiginjo glass. And this I like when you put both together next to each other. I mean, you can't say one is superior to the other.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. For they're equal. They're different products, different categories, different styles. Personally, I think Junmai is really the one that will conquer the world, because it has the one ingredient that wine does not have, and that's umami.
Umami, yeah, I was going to say.
And this offers food combinations and food matches on menus that wine is not always the best choice. And
recently, and how much kind of feedback have you got from people in the culinary world about the interactions with the glass and the sake and the food?
Yes, for the chef, it is for foreign chefs that we have interacted with. This is very clear. They taste it in the glass. They know it has a harmonious delivery. It has aromas, and then they taste it with their food. The better the perception, the better the result from the glass, the better the match with the food. So it is. You can compare this. You can have the same food with the same sake or wine with different glasses, and you will have a different. Same with temperature. You can also play. These are the two tools you can use: temperature and shape, to enhance your enjoyment. Yes.
But I'd be interested to know right now with the Junmai glass, how much crossover can the glass allow? As in, how much crossover into the other categories, sort of like Ginjo or Daiginjo, have you found from maybe feedback or from tasting yourself? Can it actually allow? How much leeway do you have?
We should maybe taste it.
Okay.
But in general, I would say, as mentioned before, these are anchor shapes, and there would be lots of different shapes. And we know from our own collection, there's a lot of shapes that we know that fit certain styles extremely well. I mean, we know. I mean, we have tasted some big Junmai Daiginjos, which were amazing in a huge Shiraz glass.
Old world Shiraz, if I remember correctly.
So we know kind of roughly, but we have a large collection of glasses. It's like tools, it's like a toolkit you can use. But I would say in general, it's always a question. It's not the question how it's made, what the classification is, what the grades are. It's only about what's in the glass. What's the flavor profile in the glass?
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because the connection to the special designation grades is quite a strong one, and we are seeing a movement in the market for brewers to remove the special designation grades and just label everything either as just the name that they assign to that particular beverage, or they'll label everything just a standard Junmai.
Yes.
So I'm enthusiastic to hear your commentary on that it isn't just bound to that designation, because in many ways that is imposed on brewers rather than their choice. And so I really feel like we have two anchors, and there's a world of opportunity to create things to go in between them as well.
And but in general, I would say at this point, and using the labels, you have the Daiginjo. Anything with the word Ginjo in it usually goes better in the Daiginjo glass. And anything that does not have Ginjo in it from the Junmai category goes into the Junmai glass. Better than other glasses that we have tasted.
Yeah.
So you could. This is a great starting point.
You're happy for people to experiment as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, these are, if you have a glasses, you can drink from whatever you want. We only make a recommendation. That's our mission. We only recommend the suitable shapes which the industry asks us for.
Well, we've been talking a lot about this lovely glass, but it is still
Yes.
empty.
It's
I,
still
I
empty.
hate to
No,
sound like the person with
No,
the
but there's
problem,
an order to
but
things, isn't there? There's a-
Before we taste, let's just maybe do one, before we taste the Junmai, let's just do one more thing, because the glass number 2, which is our Riesling glass, almost looks the same shape as the Daiginjo glass. And this was also included as one of the 6 final shapes at the final workshop. And you see when you look at the rim, there's maybe 2-3 millimeters difference in height of the bowl. The stem is slightly different because it's just a different execution, so it doesn't really matter. But the shape is just slightly different. It's a little bit higher. And what this does is, and when we asked the brewers, so what did you not like about this one? I will show you now.
Okay.
Pour the ochoko into the content from the ochoko into the Riesling glass.
that's pathetic. Look how
Maybe you may need a little bit more in the.
We are back.
Let's give
I think-
Rebecca
sorry,
a little bit more of the Daiginjo.
Yes. No, it's fine. I will need a little bit more. Sorry.
So just have one more control sip from the Daiginjo glass.
Okay.
Look at the delivery, just over the tip. And look at the balance of the umami and the sweetness, especially. The acidity and alcohol are there to support, but it's the umami and the
Yeah, the
sweetness.
umami and sweetness of kind of melt
And the glass
together.
number 2,
Yep.
you'll see that you just lift your head a little bit further backwards, which will really deliver it to the tip. Really to the tip, and it's sweeter. It's sweet. It emphasizes the sweetness.
But it also really picks up the acidity as well.
Because of the velocity that it
And the
hits,
finish is
Yeah.
bitter.
Yeah. It sends the sake right to the back of the
Yes, very
mouth,
quickly.
and that's where you get the bitterness, right?
Yes.
You don't even get a chance to get the sweetness
Exactly.
or the umami.
That really emphasizes the bitterness.
Yes.
I'm so surprised.
Yeah.
Because that completely throws out that lovely harmony, as you're talking about maximizing
Yes.
the harmony and unique characters of the beverage.
Yes.
You have hit the PR button on that one.
That's why I think when you knock back sake, you get that kind of like bitter spirit kind of quality.
But our discovery, or we cannot scientifically prove this, but what we know is when we deliver a substance to the tip, and it does have bitterness, the alertness for bitterness is increased. So I call it like there's 2 gates for bitterness. One is not to let it in. So when you look at a baby that spits out spinach, it just touches it with the tip and spits it out because it's too bitter. Not to let it in. So you have a sensory, your taste buds are very sensitive to bitterness at the very tip because you want to keep things out if you need to. And the second one is before you swallow. So that's the second gate. And what happens is with the Daiginjo glass is that you just pass the gate, the first gate, which means you are a little bit desensitized for bitterness at the second gate, which creates the result.
Well, as a sake judge who enjoys judging hundreds upon hundreds of sake per day, I'm now questioning, have I outed something in the tasting process because the delivery was not compatible to the beverage in the glass?
To the vessel.
Now my mind is racing.
It's probably true.
That's the problem with most
Yeah.
competitions, though, isn't it?
Indeed.
Yeah, it's all kind of one standard that might not necessarily
Yeah.
fit that style.
I don't know, but it's just this process has actually really got me thinking. Gosh, I
Especially the
do need,
difference
just as
between these two
we're
glasses.
consciously drinking and we're consciously tasting right now, I need to be consciously selecting as well when I'm thinking about what vessel I'm choosing.
that's right, because we don't really have a competition that does that, right? Where you get to actually judge the sake in different vessels. That would be quite interesting. We have the sake in a wine glass competition, which does it just in a wine glass, right?
And beautiful sake specific Riedel glassware, I should say.
Yes, indeed, indeed. So, well, perhaps you could set something like that. Yeah, they get to actually, judge the sake in different sort of vessels, and actually you judge it overall, not just because it's good in one vessel.
What we did once, we did start, and we do already provide both shapes to different competitions or different presentations as a reference. They still use the ochoko as a reference point, because this is what you must have. When you taste, you must have one reference point. It's very important, because you can't. Because it makes such a difference, you must use the same shape.
That's right. Yeah.
For everything, but it's up to you to choose the shape. So we do sometimes provide for one competition. I think we've provided the Kikichoko, or not we didn't provide it, but they had it, and they had the Daiginjo glass for the Daiginjo category and the Junmai as a reference point, because the Kikichoko would be a tasting tool. These are Epicurean tools, tools to increase your pleasure, tools not to taste. They're not professional, not really for professionals, although I think it's a very interesting reference point for professionals, because if people drink from those, you will see actually what would it taste from the perfect shape. Right. The Riesling glass has a smaller ring diameter as the Junmai, the Daiginjo glass, and because of this, it forces your head position to lean further back, and by doing that, the tongue moves up, and you get it right to the tip. It's very good for Riesling, because Riesling is very high in acidity, and you want to emphasize the fruit.
Yeah,
you want it as sweet as possible.
It's super sweet as well, in a lot of cases, isn't it? Yes. Not all cases.
Same with sweet wines. You wanna avoid the tip like the plague. Okay, then put the Riesling glass aside, or maybe park your Daiginjo in the Riesling glass, and you can always pour it back.
Okay.
And we want to rinse the Daiginjo glass with the next sake.
Oh, I see.
And I would kindly ask you not to rinse it, to empty the glass, but not to smell it, because this was the dilemma we had. Outside of Japan, this was the Daiginjo glass was the Riedel sake glass. So when they tasted Junmais in that glass, they said, well, it doesn't really work really well, does it, your sake glass? And of course, it doesn't work, because it's not a Junmai glass, it's a Daiginjo glass. And this little comparison will really highlight why we would definitely recommend to steer away with Junmai, especially a traditional style like this, from any kind of egg-shaped glass that concentrates aromas, because those aromas that you will taste or smell from this one, the very harsh, earthy, fungal type aged characteristics on the top nose are just too overpowering for most people.
When it comes to sake service, a lot of people say you should swirl your sake in wine glasses. A lot of people say you absolutely should not. Is there a Riedel stance on that?
Oh, the glasses are designed to be swirled, because the swirling of, first of all, in order to swirl, you need to have a shape that allows you to swirl. That's why if you overpour the Junmai glass, it could actually spill.
Yes, I discovered that the first time I tried it. Yes. And I splashed actually Tomita-san, who was one of your early participants.
So maximum 2 fingers is our recommended serving level for the Junmai glass, is a good guide, because you can comfortably swirl it without spilling. So don't overpour them. And when you don't overpour them, you can really comfortably swirl them. And the more egg-shaped, the more convex-shaped, the easier to swirl. So these are the characteristics that the brewers said we do not want to emphasize. These characteristics, these kind of earthy fungal and aged characteristics we do not like to show to our customers as much. So we hence they chose really the wide bowls, which kind of de-emphasize the perhaps so-called negative elements, not negative, but the dominance of negative elements, to make it more elegant, make it less intensive, and have these kind of caramel or more positive elements to come more to the forefront.
Absolutely. I get a lot of mousiness on the nose in the Daiginjo, and mousiness, anyone,
Mousy,
yeah.
Yes.
It's a cute animal, but
Yes.
not something I want to be
No,
drinking.
exactly. Humans don't, because mushroom or fungal smells are very close to mold or moldy smell, things that are off, and our senses are immediately alerted to reject anything that could be off. Yes.
This now, for me, when I compare the two, while, as you say, there's much more of a mushroomy shiitake mushroom, maybe even a little bit of daikon or some kind of pickled vegetable on the nose here, which are all things, as a judge, I'm not wanting to experience when I'm judging a sake. Compared with the same sake in the Junmai glass, I'm picking up honmirin, much more like honey, even some some lovely stewed fruit aromas as well in there. So it's
Right.
completely changed the olfactory experience.
Yes.
Absolutely. The Daiginjo glass, I'm getting a lot of vegetal notes to such an extent that sometimes I almost get like a bit of rubbery sort of petrol smell, which I wouldn't associate too much with sake in general, but it's just a world of difference with the Junmai glass because you still have that kind of mushroomy, umami forward nose, but it's much more well-rounded and elegant in that, like, instead of vegetal and rubbery, you're getting like cooked fruit, like you said, Rebecca, maybe sauteed onions, something like that, something buttery and
Very
creamy.
caramel, isn't it?
Yeah,
Like you said, very caramelized.
Yes.
And also thinking, I mean, 99.9% of the time, my sake experience is at a table. And at a table, if I was to be having a pleasurable meal, the intensity of this aroma, not only is it perhaps what we could say, the demerit points in terms of olfactory experience, it's also incredibly intense.
Yes.
It's very thick, and it is actually quite heavy,
Yes.
which is a little bit exhausting.
Yeah.
So combined with food aromas that would be on the table, it could create quite a heavy, intense expression, because my nose is telling me that's what's coming.
Yes.
Yeah, actually.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when I'm going to put the sake in in the mouth, I'm going to react, differently, act differently.
Yeah.
Because I've got this natural, my brain is telling me.
It's very psychological, isn't it? This
Yeah,
is
my
very
brain is
definitely
telling me,
psychological.
I'm dealing with something really, really strong and
that's
funky in a way, versus I'm dealing with something which is balanced and.
I think we all learnt in
Yes.
science class at school that taste is predominantly aroma.
Yes.
Your taste, your experience of taste is informed by your nose. So what this is signaling to my brain is something heavy and intense is coming.
Yeah.
So we haven't tasted yet. So that's what my brain is telling me, something heavy and full on is
Yes.
coming,
Yes.
and which makes me feel like I'm going to be cautious when I taste it. This is producing lovely sort of caramelly, butterscotchy, stewed fruits, aromas, which is making me feel like, oh, this is going to be lovely, and I kind of want it to wash across my
Yes.
palate. So even just from the aroma, it's almost telling my brain what's flavors coming and how to position the shape of my mouth now that we're being conscious drinkers.
Picking it up.
But it's a defense, Megan. You usually smell first, and maybe when you open the fridge and want to have some milk, the first thing you do is you smell. And the same thing. This is why the glasses always do show some aroma, because you want to heighten the expectation, or you want to show what's coming. And this definitely has an effect to it. So they wanted to subdue the aromas and highlight those more
Positive.
friendly characteristics on the sake. But where this glass really shines is on the palate.
Shall we do that then?
Yes. No,
Yeah.
wait.
I was just going to say one other thing. I actually wonder, I don't think any kind of much research has been done on this, but I did find an article which was asking the same question, whether you can smell umami. Actually, it's just whether there's an aroma connected with
I have
umami.
maybe seen the same research.
And I wanted to get your opinion.
They just have discovered that taste buds do have also functional olfactory receptors.
Right. Yes.
Yes.
I think we saw the same article.
Yes, we saw the same article.
Yeah.
Yes. So this is very, very interesting because this is the interesting part of that whole physiology of taste and aroma is that it's it's not understood at all by science really. The scientists are still fighting about is the tongue map real or not. Nobody really knows what's going on.
Yeah.
But it's logical when you think of your olfactory experience in terms of the aroma from the glass, and then the mouth aroma is so much more intense. Something is obviously being ignited there.
Yeah.
Yes.
And some people could have maybe one or the other could be stronger for some people.
Well, it's then now we only thought it was retro olfaction that has the sense of smell involved when we have the liquid inside the mouth. But now we all know there is even there's two sensors that can detect aromas in the mouth.
Will Riedel be sponsoring that kind of research?
No, we do.
Please?
We did some very interesting other research that we also did with Tokyo University. We did a research on the development of aroma in the glass, and we know also that alcohol distribution comes from the sides. But when we swirl, it all blends in. But we know that the different shapes will have a completely different development of the alcohol in the glass, and our perception is that the aroma molecules sit in the glass in different layers according to their specific weight. And
makes sense.
And the floral
I know.
So the esters have a different weighting.
They would have a different weight. Otherwise, one wouldn't be below and one wouldn't be higher.
Well, they'll have different carbon
They
combinations. So it makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, they are different weights.
Different scents, different combinations. We know that usually the floral and fruit aromas rise very fast upwards. We know that alcohol sits fairly low and then rises from the sides. We know that those kind of brown aromas sit somewhere in the widest part.
By brown aromas, do you mean umami aromas?
I would say caramel, toast, these kind of brown aromas. Right. Green aromas like asparagus or citrus fruits, they would sit up top of the brown aromas. But don't quote me on that. But we think, we sort of say, there's more here and there's more there. It's just, observational tests we've done with this. We also did an interesting test with an Austrian company that makes measuring devices called Anton Paar. They tested. It's a completely different. So you may have seen that we actually, George Riedel on the video was shaking sake in a decanter.
I did see that, and I was a little bit.
Yes. Why would you shake a decanter? I mean, sake in a decanter. Why would you shake that with wine? For wine service, we widely recommend this today. We call it even shock decanter. We even have different designs that allow you to shake it very easily, because what we discovered is that there's two things happening when we physically activate something like wine and sake. Is that oxygen goes in and CO2, carbon dioxide, goes out. Carbon dioxide, when in solution in a liquid, it's carbonic acid, and as the name already said, carbonic acid would have an acidic quality. So when we pour the wine from the bottle into the glass, we can measure the oxygen and the CO2 levels. And we've discovered that oxygen would be 5 times when we put it in a decanter, and would go up to 3,002% is 3,200% is how many times? Like 30 times when we shock decant. So we can increase the oxygen level in the beverage by shock decant, by physically activating it. And we can reduce the carbon dioxide dissolved in the liquid by almost 60%. And this has the same effect as opening up a wine early, decanting it the day before, as they used to recommend before, and has the same effect. You can do that within a minute. You can shock decant and shake it. That's hence George Riedel shook the sake. Why did he do that?
I understand.
Why did he do that? Because
he did that to add more oxygen.
Actually, that was not the initial reason why he did it. There was one sake there that had a kabishu, off flavor, that smelled like cork. It was like TCA from cork,
TCA, yeah.
The cork smell. And we said there is no cork there, but obviously also sakes do have can have this kind of fault when they maybe don't handle the wooden tools very well, and some kabi goes in there and creates the kabishu. And we know from wine that sometimes when we shake decant or when we decant those wines, you can blow off this kind of off flavors. You can reduce, sometimes even eliminate them. And this is exactly what happened in Nagoya. We shock decanted it, and it was like a different beverage. And we researched something else. We found that Japanese knew this a lot longer ago than we did. In the Edo period, they discovered that when they make the sake, it's in a book written in the Edo period in 1733. They discovered that and it's written here, when the sake is still young, it has a smell that stings your nose and tastes bitter. After a long boat journey from Hyogo Prefecture to Edo, these sakes have become sweeter, richer in umami, and smoother and balanced in taste, especially sakes which were taken directly from the barrel. This is because during the journey, the sake rocked inside the barrel, which resulted in a smoother and mellow taste.
And you have it written on there, Kudari sake. There was 2 types of sake in the Edo period. One was basically which traveled up from Hyogo to Tokyo, and they gave it this name, right? And then the other stuff that came from a different direction was kind of lower. Yeah. That's right, was lower quality. And when they served it in the soba restaurants, the soba, they kind of gave these different names.
So from our perspective, when we look at sake today, and when I had sake outside of Japan. And I remember one incident in Hong Kong. We did a tasting in Hong Kong for media and for different consumers in a bigger audience. And we went to dinner afterwards, and we took all the sakes with us, and everybody was sipping and nipping and things. But then when the honey glazed roasted duck and the Peking, or roasted pork and the Peking duck came out, the Junmai, this was like a sponge for the Junmai, and the bottle was gone in 15 minutes. 4 people emptied a bottle of sake in 15 minutes. And this is where I think we want to go to. We want to have drink sake, let's have another bottle and let's decant it. This is really our what we envision for the future of sake, to pour it like wine, to drink it like wine, and to integrate it into also non-Japanese food from Italy to Brazil in a culinary environment that celebrates this beverage just as much as wine did.
You generally don't decant white wine as much as you do red wine, right? It tends to be more red wine, with exceptions, of course. But
We today we decant. We may not decant all. We would be choosy. We would always decant. You would never decant, or you would be very cautious to decant a old red wine, a red wine, because originally decanting was used in order to separate, because a lot of the wines in those days were unfiltered, and they had a lot of sediment. After 10 years, 15 years, they got sediment, and you wanted to separate the sediment from the wine. That's why you use the decanter. You use the candle.
In the case of port, that's why you do the
Yes.
types of port, don't you?
Yes. Today, the wines are much cleaner. They're drunk much earlier. They don't keep them as long. So we would recommend to be very cautious with older wines, and presumably also older sakes.
That's where I was going. Yeah. Does age have anything
Yes.
to do with it? Yeah.
I would be very gentle with aged sake. Very gentle. Pour it quickly into the glass, and decant the younger stuff. But decant it. Have it first from the glass. Try it. See it how it goes, and maybe then decant it a little and see how it changes.
And Junmai is more likely to go through some type of aging, even if it's not actual deliberate aging, maybe just part of the general, the kind of the flow, the brewing flow,
Yes.
because it has the elements that will age better
Yes.
than, say, like a Daiginjo
Yes.
or whatever.
And I think you mentioned, actually, you found a restaurant where they pour.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. So I was having a little drinking session with Aoyuki, one of the sake samurai, Japanese sake samurai, and she just recently took part in an experience in Yotsuya Sanshomei in a place called, let me get the name right, Chijo no Mori. And Chinjo, I didn't get it right. So Chinjo no Mori, right? And they do this experience where they serve the sake with different pouring styles. And the sommelier, he basically changes the pouring style to fit that particular sake. And so one example would be not using a drop stop, which is quite common, right? Or pouring the sake from the side of the vessel as opposed to actually into the center or something. I mean, you said
I mean, our research suggests that it has an effect. If you pour it from the bottle, you pour it in a different way, you splash it in, you pour it higher, it definitely will have an effect on the oxygen and
there
CO2.
are those cultural elements in the sake world. When, for example, you're pouring okan sake or warmed sake, I've always been advised to pour it in a round circular motion to make it seem more soft and round and mellow, rather than splashing it in from the tokuri into the ochoko. So I do suspect that Japanese people have probably got some already got some benchmark techniques for this, perhaps.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have not tasted it yet.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
I had to wait because I was starting to sound as though I was the problematic person in the room. But
Okay.
thank you, Sebastian, for taking that one.
okay, great. Well, let's taste from the Junmai glass first. And before we taste, let me just
Junmai.
quickly explain.
That's
because
the trick.
Arthur also may not get to it. And just talk about why the diamond shape was preferred to the more rounder shape. And we found out afterwards it was the velocity, the speed, because the round shape, the speed will be fast. The liquid will go very fast. You will tilt the glass, and the liquid will be relatively quick to enter.
So for our listeners that are not able to see what we're doing, are we using a unoaked Chardonnay glass?
Oak Chardonnay glass.
Oak Chardonnay glass.
Which is also wide, but it has a round shape. And we're using the Junmai glass, which is not round, it has a diamond shape.
The Chardonnay glass is very appley, I would describe it. It looks like a quite a plump apple in terms
Yes,
of
it's
its
like
shape.
almost like a round bowl.
Yeah.
Yes. And when we do the same, when we tilt the glass from the Junmai glass, you see it stops. It stops. The liquid stops. It's much, which means that the liquid will glide very gently. Your tongue will be under your teeth. Rebecca,
Thank you.
because you will put your tongue automatically there in order to position the tongue in a certain way to drink from this shape with the liquid inside. And you'll see that the liquid will flow very gently, glide to the very broadly on top of your tongue, very broadly into the center area, where you can keep it. You can keep it, and then you can keep it there for as long as you want, because it will not go automatically back, because your head position is slanted downwards, and the liquid will not jump over your tongue. It will stay there before you push it back, and you have a very nice finish, which is, the bitterness is there, of course, because the beverage has bitterness in it, but it is integrated with the other elements.
So I just drank it, and it's exactly what you just said. That's amazing. In fact, we were talking about an open-faced vessel that Chris enjoys drinking from. And in fact, my tongue became that vessel almost. And that, you're right, it did hit the attack, was delivered, I shouldn't say the attack, the delivery was much further up my tongue. Yes. And then the way that my tongue had positioned itself without me knowing it, how clever, was almost became plate-like.
Yes, exactly. It's like, and pay attention, your facial muscles are totally relaxed. You don't, you just, your face, your mouth is open, you're completely relaxed. The tongue has a very large surface available to you, because the tongue is relatively flat. It doesn't pucker, it doesn't tense up. And this is what they said.
What I also experienced is that it's sitting there, and then you naturally, when you're going to swallow, you push your tongue up to the roof of your mouth, right? And so it sort of squeezes the junmai, and then it finally releases the acidity.
That's true.
Yes.
So it's like umami, sweetness in the middle, and then when you have to swallow, it's only then that you get the acidity.
And you have very little bitter aftertaste in the back, because it goes so quickly. First of all, you bypass gate number 1 completely, and gate number 2 has no time to react,
because you basically squash it, and
Boom.
it's out.
It's out.
Yeah, what you brought up earlier, Chris, is you say you prefer drinking out of, like sakazuki.
Yep.
I don't think it's a coincidence that there are similarities between the shape of the junmai glass and those style glasses. Basically, I don't think it's coincidence that you settled upon that shape, style, and that there are similarities between that.
We did not settle.
Or
the brewers
the industry.
The brewers
settled.
Because I think also, not because they wanted to have it similar to the Sakatsuki or to that open versus there. No, but I would think that my personal theory at some stage was, I'm not sure if I believe that anymore, was that because junmai, it was all junmai, up to the 20th century. And perhaps that junmai maybe have not been 100% liquid either. And maybe the aromas of that sake may have not been that pleasant either.
We pretty much know.
So you wanted to just slurp it quickly and have as little capture of any aromas as possible, have it as open as possible to completely get rid of aromas that you could smell, because it may have not been that pleasant. And then the delivery was also such that was in a way a similar delivery.
Makes complete sense.
Has everyone tried it from the junmai glass?
Many times, actually.
Let's go Daiginjo,
To do it together.
because now you see, even though you will have a lot of activation of bitterness from the beginning, and then it really hits you in the back.
Oh my goodness, that's completely different. Again, it's a vegetal bitterness, sort of brassica. I'm getting a lot of I'm actually getting
Yes.
not a very pleasant drinking experience out of that.
Not very pleasant at all. Actually, I think the acidity is a lot more heightened with
The
this,
acidity at the
Yes.
beginning,
as well
right, where
as
you
the
run a point.
heat and the
Yeah.
pepperiness
Yes.
that comes
Yes.
with the bitterness.
And for
at
me, the
very
after
end.
aroma is reminding me of when you boil like broccoli or like that kind of that kind of vegetable. When you steam it, when you put it in the steamer, and the smell of that water is what the after aroma of this has become,
Yeah.
which is definitely not what this brewer intends. I think in the delivery of their beverage.
Yes.
Mm.
It overshadows, it completely dominates the taste picture.
Yeah, it does.
So this is really where it shines, because the delivery here is really nice, or from the Junmai glass.
And I think you feel the alcohol at the end as well.
Yes.
It's like spiky,
Yes.
like kind of spirits of alcohol, and as opposed to this, where it kind of dissipates almost. And
Yes.
there's nothing left over at
Yes.
the end.
Coming back to your selection process for the glass, in the short movie, we saw that you actually tried different shapes over a number of different sake. I mean, sake. I'm not talking about glass shapes, but not only a number of shapes, but a number of sake.
Yes.
So different sake,
Yes.
maybe as many as brewers. I mean, I don't know how many.
No, we had 170 people, brewers, and maybe 95% brewers and 5% non-brewers, but sake experts, and 42 workshops and 120 different junmais from all 7 producing regions in Japan.
Okay. And shape number 5,
Yes.
as it comes
Yes.
out in the movie, was a clear winner.
Yes.
And my question is, was it a clear winner across all types, or what was the dispersion across the various sakes?
Interesting, in Nagoya, it was very close, because the sakes from Nagoya that there was other shapes that were, I think the Junmai, the number 5 had, I think, 13 elimination points, and the second, the number 2 had 15. So it was very close. But I think in the case of Tokyo, it was very clear. I think it was 5 eliminations versus the second was coming in at over 10 or 12.
And it probably should have that differentiation, because while sake doesn't have the same distinct terroir focus that wine does, there is regional variation, there's regional character. So that would be an organic part of the testing process, I think.
Yes.
May I just go back to the glass, because one thing I'm personally discovering with this comparison between the Junmai and the Daiginjo glass is the Daiginjo glass, for me, the flavour feels very empty in the middle palate.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not getting a lot of umami-ness.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And when I went back into the Junmai glass, there it was. There was the umami-ness. There was the sweetness. I went back in, and again, I got acidity, bitterness was accentuated, and I felt it very hollow in the middle palate.
Well, I'm going to add on top of that. I'm going to say I don't get any umami whatsoever in the Daiginjo glass.
Yes.
If I didn't know what this sake was, I might not identify it
Yes.
as a Junmai, if I'm honest, because it doesn't have any.
What we find is that the umami perception is heightened at the center part, and when you deliver it right there, the senses focus on that center part. When you drink from the Daiginjo glass, it brings the liquid relatively high bitterness to the tip, which puts everything on alert. And it doesn't care about the marker for proteins, which umami is. Doesn't care about it, because the senses are all about defense.
And I don't care what the scientists say about the tongue map. There isn't a tongue map. Okay, I accept that. But you definitely don't get umami on the tip of the tongue.
Yes.
I've never experienced it on the tip of the tongue. It's always further at the back or towards the center of the palate.
Yes. We do find also the same observation, that sweetness and bitterness, there is a high sensitivity at the very tip, because this is protection.
Yeah.
and sweetness is what you look for. These are the two extremes.
Yeah.
The thing that could kill you, and the only thing that the brain can eat. The only thing the brain needs is sugar, glucose. So we seek out to defend ourselves from toxins and seek out the sweetness. Only is also how an infant would develop over time. They would reject. They would first start with sweet, fat. Then comes protein. Then only the minerality and the acidity, and it ends up with bitterness. So bitter foods only we appreciate when we get older.
And I experienced this with the Sakazuki and the Hirohai as well. What happens in the Junmai glass is it calms the Junmai down.
Yes.
All those kind of aggressive qualities sort of disappear. This becomes really amenable and gentle and kind of,
Yes.
Which kind of brings back to something you brought up earlier. You mentioned really briefly that you feel like Junmai is in a position to be kind of the vanguard for really bringing sake to a global stage on it because of the umami, because of the unique flavor constituents and things like that in there. That being said, those those defense mechanisms that we have built into us, a lot of those things are also more prominent. And so in a lot of cases, for lack of a better word, newbies or people who aren't necessarily accustomed to drinking sake, a lot of times it's not necessarily non-Junmai profiled, but more Ginjo, Daiginjo profiles and things that tend to be the ones that the industry has up until recently kind of leaned on in order to present sake. But that's a little bit contradictory as to sort of, I think, what you were mentioning there is what I think for maybe a lot of us have also experienced as well.
Yes, I think the Daiginjo is fantastic. Ginjos are fantastic, but their competition is wine.
Definitely.
They have to in the global market of beverages. They have to compete with wine. So when you are in a place, in a restaurant or on the plane, and you have a choice between great wines and great sake, or the Ginjo, it is very hard. It's tough out there. It's tough for Ginjo to compete. Not so for Junmai.
No.
Personally, also my main epiphany moments with sake was Junmai, I have to say. And it was amazing food matches that I have never had before. I mean, I had 3 moments, and those really hooked me on. They really got me into sake. I have to admit, I was not really into sake. I didn't really like it in the 90s. When we did the Daiginjo glass, I liked it, but I would have always veered back to wine as my preferred choice of drink. But with Junmai, I now when I go on a plane sometimes and have choices, I go for Junmai. The only problem is they don't always serve Junmai. They maybe serve lots of 4 different styles of the same type. It's my pet peeve on the plane, because I said, well, the choices are Junmai Daiginjo, Junmai Daiginjo, and Junmai Daiginjo, and Junmai Daiginjo. So I want to have Junmai. I get a great Japanese meal. I would love to pair that with some. It's
been the marker
Junmai.
of quality for a while now, unfortunately.
Well, actually, that makes me curious, because I know my personal story, and I've just heard Wolfgang's personal story, and the sake that was my epiphany, that I think every single interview I have has got the story about me falling in love with sake thanks to the first sip of sake I had in Japan. That was not a Junmai Daiginjo. That was not a Daiginjo. That was not a Ginjo. That was not a particularly refined sake. It was a sake that changed my life, because I think there is something that is inherently delicious about something that's beautifully umami.
Yes.
I didn't discover it that way. I discovered it via what is equivalent of a Ginjo. We'll just talk a bit of Junmai, but it was as close to a Ginjo as you're going to get. But let's say I could go back in a time machine and I could stop myself back then from tasting that awful other stuff that I'd tasted before, which was probably, I don't know, probably not sake or something, that gave me that image of what everything other than that would taste like. And maybe I might have discovered it. If there was something like, the Junmais that we can taste now readily out there for people to taste. And I'm also seeing a definite rebellion from foreigners more than Japanese towards being served straight off a ginjo or a daiginjo.
Yes.
It's not actually what people want.
No, absolutely not. When I discovered also when we started with the Junmai research of going to sake shops as well as restaurants, the flavor range was they had lots of brands, and they display them with brands. They put them brands into the menu, but there was very, very narrow flavor range offered. They all had them in the back. You had to almost. You couldn't even ask for it. They wouldn't, no, this is not available. Or they would not even serve it to you because they would think that you may not like it. And this is part of the Japanese service culture, I think, is to make sure that there's no disappointment with the customer.
Yeah.
Well, I do think, like with ochoko bashing, we don't want to be ginjoshu bashing either, because there is beautifully crafted ginjoshu sake available, and like Junmai, that whole market is evolving in leaps and bounds, and so much so that actually the designations of Daiginjo and Junmai Daiginjo are kind of old shackles that hold back brewers from what they're trying to do.
And there'll be situations where a ginjo or a daiginjo is better than a Junmai. I mean, like, maybe at the beginning of a meal as opposed to middle. That doesn't mean the ginjo and daiginjo don't pair with food. I'm not saying that, but maybe there are some situations where it's just simple.
Absolutely,
and
it's much more approachable. I mean, people do not start. I have to say, to the defense of ginjo, Junmai has certain qualities that need to be acquired.
Yes.
And you don't wake up in the morning as a wine person and says, wow, I'm going to have this Junmai now, and wow, this is the most amazing drink. It usually happens with a ginjo or Daiginjo, Junmai Daiginjo, which has none of the marked characteristics of Junmai, and it's like an entry. It's like an entry stage.
Yeah.
And food is the key point, I think, as well. There's no doubt that the Junmai definitely goes better with food. But there are some situations where you don't want that much umami with whatever you're pairing it with. And then, of course, in that situation, you're going to have to dial down to a ginjo or daiginjo. So everything has its place.
Yeah. Wolfgang, can I ask you again, what was your epiphany moment with sake?
Epiphany moment with sake, one of them was in Kanazawa. Was a sushi bar where they served a very, very fatty fish grilled with a 100-year-old sauce. So this was like a umami bomb.
Wow.
With fat, and they served the aged Junmai with this, and this was unbelievable. I've never tasted that had that taste before, and this was unbelievable moment. I would say this was my final wanna get married with sake moment. Was not fall in love, but
perfect proposal.
Perfect proposal.
Perfect.
I'm gonna propose.
We're all salivating here.
Excellent, thank you.
I feel like we've taken a whole lot of your time. Just kind of the last kind of question, just kind of wrap up. What do you have coming down the pipe? Anything exciting that you'd like to share? I was looking at the sake map. We had the Junmai covered. We had the Daiginjo covered. I see two big gaping holes on there. I'm wondering if you have anything interesting in the works or anything.
I think we will keep experimenting between those two anchor shapes with what we have right now, because we can discover a lot of. We always need to do a discovery first, as you've seen with the workshop process, before we actually can start our official workshop. And of course, the Riedels need to be involved. They need to understand there is a need for this shape. So I think it took us 10 years before we started with the Junmai glass after the Daiginjo glass. But I don't think if we do something, it will not take 10 years. But at the moment, this year we have focused on Japanese koshu, and we're very happy to have a glass for koshu wine. Which is also a great variety from Japan. So I think we're quite busy with those two at the moment, but we're always in our team. Our team are always experimenting, and we need to also need to explore more of the sake world, how it's evolving, and we need to know more, because one of the reasons why we were able to actually, I think, finalize the project is we knew enough about sake to actually interact with the industry. And this was not the case in 2010 because it's so complex. And at that time, there was still no information available. The internet was not really churning out information like we have today. It was very hard to get educated about sake. In the 90s, it was like nothing. But even in the early teens, it was early.
Yeah, I know that's when I arrived.
Yes.
So I can
Yes.
definitely support you
Yes.
there. But I suppose the world or the sake world or sake lovers, I think, would applaud you for your tenacity and your commitment to going the full course. And it's been an absolute pleasure to experience this guided tasting with you.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. No, this has also been for us probably the most, I would say personally, also the most exciting project of my whole business life, because to actually, first of all, it was a long haul workshop. Like, I don't think we will do ever another workshop that takes 8 years, but to have some impact on the proliferation of sake around the world is on a beverage that has over 1,000-year-old history is quite humbling.
How do people sign up or participate in these?
You just go there and open the menu and point your finger
And
at the item.
Obviously, the caviar tasting is not free. Is there these courses?
It's not that. It's a tiny little box. I'm not sure about the exact price right now, but it's not too dear, because we really want. You can also have the Junmai, just the glass tasting, or you can have it as a food pairing. We have, I think, 2-3 regular food pairings on our menu in Ginza, and we also have 300 wines, and we also sell sake there.
So I think I was looking on the website, and you can sign up for a guided tasting or tour of
Yes.
Junmai, and it not only includes the tasting, but the glass or glasses as
The
well.
glasses usually are included
It's
in
a pretty darn good deal, actually.
Yes. Yes.
I must admit, I did go to a Riedel Junmai tasting at a department store that shall remain nameless because it's not a sponsor of this this talk show. And indeed, it was a Riedel tasting, and I was walking away. The staff ran after me with my shopping bag. I was like, "Oh, what's this? It's your glasses. You forgot them." I had no idea that it came with the deal. So
Yes.
I was pleasantly surprised. Thank you very much, Riedel.
Great, thank you. So thank you for inviting us to Sake on Air.
Thank you very much
Thank you for
your,
sharing with us.
for
Thank
this
you for
this
coming.
workshop, which
Yeah.
has been really, really exciting.
I only wish radio could involve more of your senses.
And that wraps it up for one more episode of Sake on Air. Thank you again so much this week for tuning in. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at questions@sakeonair.com. And if speed is of the essence, you can track us down at Sake on Air on pretty much all your favorite social media platforms. If you would be so kind as to take a moment to leave a review on whatever your podcast listening player of choice is, it really does help us a great deal and helps get word out about the show. Please do get in touch. Let us know what you like about the show, what you'd like to hear more about, and how we can further lend to your sake-infused lifestyle. Sake on Air is made possible with the support of the Japan Sake and Shochu Makers Association and is broadcast from the Japan Sake and Shochu Information Center located in Tokyo, Japan. So with that, we will see you in a couple of weeks. Kanpai.